ever go off to school, none of them ever are enrolled or do anything in the local community. Not to mention they're all like 30-year-old dudes. One of these ATF agents, Robert Rodriguez, posed as an undercover agent and joined the Davidians. And by joined, I mean he would walk across the street and listen to a couple of their sermons and then come back. It turns out early on, David figured out that Robert Rodriguez was undercover, but didn't say anything and just let him be a part of what they were doing. Again, David had already invited the ATF in before, so it's not like he was scared that they were going to see something. Rodriguez eventually filed his findings within Mount Carmel, and they were something else. Rodriguez said that he had found lower receiver parts, as well as aluminum blocks and fake grenades, which, as already established, duh. To explain the absurdity of the legality, and for YouTube this is airsoft, I guess, I don't know. This is an AR-15 modeled to look like an M16, very similar to the same semi-automatic rifles that David and the Davidians would have had around this time. Within the realm of legality, the part of the weapon that is legally the gun itself is the receiver. On an AR-15 like this lower piece is the receiver, and this is just a hunk of metal. The reason being there has to be one piece that is serialized and transported to the individual, so the block that holds the trigger is often considered the receiver part. On the AR-15 specifically, any mil-spec AR-15 shares the same part dimensions. So you can take any receiver that you have and then combine it with the other pieces of a barrel or whatever other assembly you're working with and create your own rifle from there. It's kind of like Legos. For those that are familiar with firearms, it's very common for someone to buy a receiver and then build out the rest of the gun however they want it, because the receiver is the only part that matters. And it was very common, as proven by records, for the Davidians to order a bunch of receivers and then build out the rifles and then sell them again legally at gun shows. The ATF looked at this report that said there are receivers laying around and said, but what if this time, for the first time, they decide to use those receivers for something nefarious? Because if you were going to illegally convert your weapon to be fully automatic, you would have to damage and alter the receiver itself. And even though they had a long history of never doing that, the ATF decided that this time it means they're making illegal weapons. That would be like if I walked into your house and then saw steak knives on your kitchen counter and immediately assumed that you were going to stab me to death, because that's apparently the only function of a steak knife. If it sounds weird for me to show examples and to go into that amount of detail regarding the legality, just know that this was the justification for the ATF's later actions.
In a word, what the search warrant found was gun parts. It was the duty of the ATF to show that those gun parts were owned with an intent to create illegal weapons. I'm not a lawyer or a judge, but my reading of the warrant does not convince me that that intent was there.
Also, listening to the rest of Rodriguez's report was painful.
The affidavit describes how an undercover agent had observed the upper and lower receivers of